Hey guys, my name is Tyler Harrington. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. And depending on when you started following me, you may or may not know that I actually have a rather extensive background in photography. I started taking photography classes in high school. I technically have enough photography credits to have a degree in photography. And we actually shot photography weddings for the first 4 years of our business. So I definitely have the knowledge, understanding of what it takes to be a photographer. And back in 2011, I made the transition from being just a photographer into the world of video. And in this video today, I'm gonna share with you the 5 things that I wish I knew back in 2011 when I made that transition. All right, so the first thing you need to know about video is that when you are shooting video, it is essentially like shooting a medium JPEG for photography. Now, there is raw video, it exists in the world, but in what we're talking about today, there's not really raw video. The video file that you're getting out of your camera when you are recording is a compressed file that has sharpness and saturation and contrast and all these different things baked into the image in the same way that you would have in a JPEG. So what this means is that when you get into editing for your videos, you're gonna have limited abilities to make big changes like you would with your raw photos for photography. So this is why it's super important that you get as many things correct in camera as possible when shooting video, and you're not relying on editing it in post later. So 2 setting changes that I would make if you're trying to shoot video with your photography camera is 1, I would always be shooting in custom Kelvin because again, white balance needs to be locked in and it's much easier to adjust across an entire video clip if the entire thing is the same white balance versus if you leave it on auto white balance, the white balance can change throughout the duration of the clip, making it a nightmare to edit in post. So always use custom Kelvin white balance. And the second thing is gonna be shooting in a neutral picture profile. So in your camera, depending on what type of manufacturer you're using, there are different picture profiles that you can use. I suggest doing a custom one. Usually you can select one that says neutral, and then I like to reduce the sharpening, the saturation, and the contrast just slightly, so that way the image that's coming out of your camera and your video file is gonna have those things slightly reduced. You can always add them back in post. You can always add contrast, add saturation, add all these things, but it's really hard to remove them. So I think that it's better to shoot with a slightly flatter image. It's not gonna look nearly as good or sharp. It's not gonna pop as much right out of camera, but you can add as much saturation, as much contrast, as much sharpening as you want within reason. But again, it's really hard to take it back out. So I suggest doing those 2 technical things in camera whenever you go to shoot video. Okay, and then little bonus tip, when you are shooting video and you're exposing your image, you always wanna err on the side, I would say, of underexposing just slightly, and we're always trying to prioritize our highlights and more specifically, our skin tones. Again, because we're shooting in essentially a medium JPEG here, you don't have as much dynamic range, as much flexibility, especially in your highlights. In video, if you start to have your highlights that are clipping, there's no getting them back. It's gonna be pure white, even if it's just clipping a teeny tiny bit. So it's always better to underexpose your image if you're unsure, because it's better, you can boost the shadows just slightly, and if you start getting noise in your shadows, you can run a denoiser or things like that on your video footage. But if your highlights are clipped and your highlights are gone, there's really nothing you can do. So always shoot to protect your highlights. All right, so our second tip for shooting great video is gonna be to invest in audio gear. Now this may seem sort of backwards, but hear me out. Get it? Hear me out. You already have the biggest investment you're going to make in your camera and your lenses. You don't really need to buy a ton else, but buying a simple piece of audio gear can really help take your videos to the next level and make them that much more professional. The number one thing you need to understand about audio is that the closer the microphone is to the source, the better it's going to sound. Now, the reason why I have to say this is because just because you invest in a nice microphone doesn't necessarily mean your audio is always going to sound great. This is more important even than I would say than the quality of the microphone. If you can get it nice and close to the audio source, it's gonna sound really good. So when you're investing in your first microphone, there's 3 main types that I would consider, and the main difference between these 3 is gonna be your use case and as well as the price. So the number 1 is gonna be a shotgun microphone that goes on top of your camera. It's just a little microphone that slides into the hot shoe mount on top of your camera. You can get these in a wide variety of prices and sizes and styles and things like that. The 2 that I suggest looking at is gonna be the Rode Video Micro, which is gonna be your cheapest option, super small, but it's gonna be a much bigger improvement over just the built-in microphones on your camera. And then the Rode VideoMic Pro. Now this is on the more expensive side, but this is one that'll last for a long time. So if you plan to really do this for a long period of time, this would be the one I would go with. I would kind of skip the lower tier ones. I have a Rode VideoMic Pro that I bought 7 years ago and I'm still using it to this day. So it is a good long-term investment. Microphone technology doesn't move as fast as like lenses and stuff like that. So this would be something worth investing in. So the only downside to shotgun microphones, again, is that they are mostly on top of your camera. So if you're gonna do something speaking to camera like this, you can still use a shotgun mic and it sound good. You just have to make sure that your subject is relatively close to the camera. So the second type of microphones I suggest are lavalier microphones. And these are the little microphones that you'll see like Jimmy Kimmel wear or Jimmy Fallon. You can clip them onto your subject. And these, again, are gonna be primarily used if you're gonna be doing anything like this. We're gonna be speaking to camera. If you know that you need to do video for that specific use case, then these lav mics are gonna be really great because you can basically put the camera anywhere you want and the audio source is still gonna be really close to the person speaking. So the first type of lav mic I suggest is going to be a lav mic to a recorder. The one I suggest is the Tascam DR10L, and I have links to all these things down in the description below. This is a really great option. It's only $200 for both the microphone and the recorder, and it's the best kind of like bang for your buck. It's really high quality, not super expensive in the grand scheme of things, only $200. The only downside to this option is that you'll have to sync the audio with your camera audio in post. So this requires a little bit more time, a little bit more know-how, but for the quality, this is gonna be the best price possible. And then the second type of lav mics that I would suggest looking into are gonna be wireless lav mics. Now again, these are gonna be a little bit more expensive, but the advantage is that they clip right onto your camera and the audio is running directly into your camera. And then your subject, whoever's speaking, is also gonna have the lav mic as well. So there is only one file. Your video file will have that really clear audio right in that file. So there's no syncing in post. Now there are actually some relatively affordable options for this. So there's the Rode Wireless Go kit that is actually a really awesome option. And then the one that I've been suggesting to people for a long time is the Rode Filmmaker Kit, Wireless Filmmaker Kit. Those will run you about $250 to $400-ish. So you have to decide, again, if this is a use case scenario that you're gonna need this for, but those are kind of the three main microphone options I would look at if you're just looking to jump into video. All right, so the third tip is going to be to always shoot in threes. Having all the knowledge in the world about how to get a really great looking image in terms of exposure and framing, and you can get everything crystal clear and looking nice and sharp. But if you don't know what to film, you're not gonna have a very compelling video. So every time you go to record something, anytime you go to film pretty much anything, I always like to think of it in this way. One, always think of anything happening with as a beginning, a middle, and an end. You want to capture at least a few shots of all of those different areas. And then also want to shoot things wide, medium, and tight. If you can start shooting everything that you do, every time you pull out your camera to shoot video, if you can start thinking about the scene, what you're filming in this way, you're gonna give yourself a ton of flexibility and you're gonna have a really compelling story instead of a bunch of just random video clips that you can't really do much with. So if you wanna think of this in terms of photography, obviously whenever you snap a photo, you're capturing a specific moment in time. But if you were assigned to shoot a photo essay of something happening, whether that be an event or even just something simple as, maybe my morning coffee routine, you wouldn't just stand in one spot in my kitchen and shoot a bunch of different photos, right? Even if you were switching lenses, you wouldn't just stand in the exact same spot and just shoot photos the entire time through the entire duration of my coffee, right? That wouldn't really tell much of a story. No, you'd probably shoot a wide shot showing the entire kitchen. You'd shoot maybe some portraits of me looking down at the, at the water or whatever. You'd shoot some shots of my hands, maybe the beans spread out on the counter, or a top-down shot of the beans in the grinder. Whatever it may be, you'd shoot all these different things if I assigned you to make, maybe a 10-shot photo essay to show the entirety of this process, right? So you can take that same mentality that you'd have towards a photo essay, and just each one of those photos, you just shoot video for, right? So if you start thinking about it in that way and filming in that way, you're gonna have a really compelling story once you start pulling everything together. So the fourth point is that the best way, the fastest way to become a better shooter and to be better at just shooting video in general is to edit what you shoot. Now, let me explain why. As you're editing along, you're gonna start realizing some things. You're gonna say, these shots that I'm shooting, I didn't hold them for long enough, right? They're only maybe 2 or 3 second long clips. I really wish they were a few seconds longer. Oh, when I try to add this movement in there, it's actually really jittery and it doesn't look very good. I can't really use any of those shots. I don't really like that. Or all I have are tight shots. I don't have any shots of the person's face. All I have are these detail shots. I need some more variety. Or I didn't get any really wide shots, right? You're gonna start noticing as you start editing these things together, what you need to improve the next time you go to shoot. All right, so the fifth and final tip is to keep it simple. If you want to have really great footage that doesn't look amateur, the best thing you can do is, I would say, frame up the shot exactly like you would for photography. Get the lighting nice, pay attention to all the things we noticed, and then hit record, and then let the action happen within your frame. When footage starts to look shaky, or you're trying to move the camera but you don't have a gimbal, you don't really know how to do these things, it starts to feel and look very amateur, very home video, not very high end. So if you're a really high end photographer and you're trying to shoot video, the best thing you can do is to just keep it really simple, keep everything locked down, just shoot with really great composition and really great lighting, and kind of let the rest happen within the frame. And then I have to add this bonus tip in here. I guess it kind of fits in this section. I don't know where else to put it. My bonus tip is going to be to bump that aperture up, especially when you're first starting. I know that as photographers, it's really nice to be able to shoot at 1.6, 1.4 and get these beautiful, backgrounds and everything looks really great. However, with video and everything moving, as you're just getting used to focusing, even if you're using autofocus, you just don't want to be shooting. It doesn't really benefit you to shoot super wide like that because it's going to be really hard for you to keep things in focus, especially as they're moving around. So I would say bump up to a 2.8, 3.2, 4.0, anything in that range is going to look much better for it to be a little less shallow, but in focus than trying to shoot at 1.4, 1.8, 2.0, and everything be out of focus. So bump that aperture up a little bit and you'll help yourself a lot. All right, so there you go. Those are your 5 tips. Now, obviously, this is kind of just scratching the surface. The depth of knowledge and things that go into video, just like with photography, is very deep and very vast. So this is just kind of scratching the surface. But if you're a photographer, like I said, and you just want to start dabbling in video, these 5 things I think will help you get started and help you to feel much more confident in shooting video and give you something right off the bat that is actually usable, that you're gonna be proud of. And then you can start digging deeper into some of the more nuanced things that go into video and all the different things. But I think that these 5 tips should help get you started. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more just like it, please consider subscribing down below. There's also a like button down there if it tickles your fancy. And like I mentioned, all those gear links that I mentioned in this video are going to be linked in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Tyler Harrington, and I'll see you next week. Bye.